What happened in your office that became the stuff of legend? The door. Years and years ago, when I quit smoking, I found my temper would often flare up during the first few weeks of abstinence. I worked at a remote branch office with a staff of 6. One morning when I came to work early, something went wrong and I was so angry that I impulsively gut-punched my office door. The door was hollow core wood. I punched right through it. I admitted my foolish outrage to my office mates when they entered an hour later. And little was said about it. I believe they were sympathetic with my situation, and supportive of my effort to quit smoking. Their matters laid at rest, nothing more said. Until the office Christmas party, when staff from all branches and the headquarters office, over 100 souls, gathered at some central location for a cocktail party and most sumptuous feast. Everything paid for by the company as a treat to us. This was followed by after-dinner drinks, and the award ceremony. The award ceremony was a production of the employees and was in the nature of a good-humored roast, drawing upon such amusing things as had happened involving any of them over the past year. Some of the recognition was by actual funny trophies which were passed from one recipient to another. Others were unlikely objects constructed of broomsticks, hubcaps, old radios, or heaven knows what. Because I and my cohorts were from the remotest branch, none of us received, or ever expected to receive, recognition at this ceremony. We had our own Christmas party, for that. Thus it was quite a surprise, to me, when I saw that my associate, Greg, was called upon by the Master of Ceremonies to announce the grand prize winner. He briefly described in very general terms the struggle of one individual to overcome a serious addiction. I was as curious as everyone else to know who, and to know the story. The room became very quiet, as the subject appeared to deviate from the laughable to the serious. The recipient was as yet unnamed. Then a cloaked object was carried onto the dais, looking for all the world like a draped coffin. With the words, "And the winner is, John Scott Gear," the black drape was pulled away to reveal my actual office door, with a precise halo painted around its wound. Somehow, the damn thing had been spirited from our office, and carried the 60 miles to the party, unbeknownst to me. And it became the stuff of legend. Who was the most frightening child you've ever met, that you have no doubt would grow up to be a dangerous adult? My wife's nephew. I wrote about him in an answer to another question. We took custody of this boy at his mother's request because he was out of control and I seemed to be the only person he would not try to dominate. He visited us for a week in 2020 and immediately stole $50 from my wife's desk. He was 12. He came to live with us in 2021, initially for the summer, but that was changed to the school year, although I shipped him back after I got deathly ill and was physically unable to control him. During that time he broke several of my power tools, shoplifted from local stores, stole from his grandfather's church and had begun to be verbally abusive towards my wife. He returned to us in May of 2022 after he was found to be stealing his sister's underwear for the purposes of masturbation, had been shoplifting, threatening students at school, and was hiding knives in his room. The plan was for my wife to take full guardianship and then place him in a behavior program in Utah. This time around he stole anything he could get his hands on, abused my dogs, accidentally stabbed me with a piece of rebar, accidentally walked in on my wife while she showered, broke the washing machine, and set fire to the yard. While in school he twice threatened the life of a female student, including pulling a knife on her during his cooking class, and threatened a school shooting. He twice ran away from home while my wife and I were out, leaving his elderly and disabled grandfather alone. He ran away a third time, from school, after he got into a physical altercation with that same female student. Then, on Thanksgiving Day, he tried to poison me. He spent 3 months in a mental hospital and 2 months in a residential behavior program before our insurance refused to cover any more treatment. They claimed he was cured and was safe to come home. We then surrendered him to the state. Since February 17th of this year, while in state custody, he has twice attacked another resident at JRC. He has sexually harassed female staff. He has mouthed off to the judge that has been assigned to handle his case, and has threatened to take my life if he ever gets out. Just in the last week, while at his new behavior program in St. George, Utah, where he has been for only 9 days, he physically assaulted another resident, stolen a knife from the dining area/kitchen, tried to run away, had a violent breakdown while at the local rec center, because he had been told it was time to leave and he didn't want to, and repeatedly refused to take his medications. Yeah, pretty much everyone that knows him is convinced he is bound for either life in prison or life in a mental institution. What is the kindest thing you have ever done that only you and maybe one other person know about? I was in the checkout line behind a young man and his small daughter, maybe 3-4-ish. His card wasn't going through even after multiple attempts. I had just lost my brother a few days prior and was there buying card stock to print his funeral programs on. My mind was full of nothing but grief and sadness, and all I wanted to do was get back to my best friend and cry in peace. I told the man that I would take care of it and, after much refusal from him, I ran my card through. He was extremely grateful and I got a huge thank you smile from the little girl. I purchased my paper and a bottle of Mount Dew and was on my way. Once I got to my car I pulled up my Walmart app to see how much I spent on the guy's stuff and saw what he had been purchasing: bacon, bread, mac and cheese, smoked sausage, a doll, and a reciprocating saw. My brother was a carpenter by trade and loved his 3 sons more than anything. My heart completely exploded in my chest. The fact that I helped a father feed his child as well as knowing he was also someone who worked with wood filled me with so much peace. I told my friend while ugly crying when I got back to her. Never told anyone else. Not even the man I had been with for about 5 years. He would have told me how stupid it was and what a waste of money. I would have spent $1,000 to feel that same way again. What is the most innocent thing you've seen? When my daughter was in kindergarten, and I would ask her about her day, she would sometimes mention a boy that she played with on the playground. She didn't know his name, but every day, she pushed him on the swings and the only word he spoke was hi. She said he was always happy and giggled when she pushed him, and that made her feel good. I assumed he was an English language learner, ELL, and never thought much about it after that. A few months into the school year, we took an extended trip to visit family overseas, so my daughter missed 2 weeks of school. When she came back, he ran up to her and said, "Missed you." I thought that was very sweet. My daughter has dyslexia, which we didn't know at the time, but she was struggling with the basics of reading already, so I thought it was perfect that an ELL kid and my daughter had hit it off and could just hang out without the pressure of talking and to get a mental break from class time, which was challenging for them. The year went on and my daughter learned his name. She overheard a teacher say it, and when she had a hard day at school, she always said her favorite part of the day was pushing her friend on the swings. Kindergarten graduation came, and just out of curiosity, I wanted to spot her friend. He has a unique name and they were calling them all out, so I knew I would spot him. I was hoping to find his parents afterward and tell them how much I appreciated his friendship with my daughter. All 4 classrooms came out and they called out names and his wasn't one of them. Then trailing slightly behind were a couple of kids from the special education room. We're an autism inclusion school and also support other disabilities. Well, the last kid to come in was him. Just like my daughter described, he had a huge smile. He also had a lot of disabilities, physical and intellectual. He wasn't ELL, rather he was mostly nonverbal. She found him after the ceremony and they said hi, but his aide walked him out and it didn't seem as though his parents had made the ceremony. The next year in 1st grade, my daughter was sad that he wasn't at recess with her anymore. She saw him occasionally across the play yard, but he had to take recess with the kindergartners. I probed her a bit about him and asked if he was different than the other kids. She said, "Yeah, he's not very good at talking." That was all she could come up with. To her, he was simply her friend. None of the rest mattered. I wish she could stay this innocent forever. What is the most terrible thing you've heard of that happened to your child? When my daughter was 3 and in daycare, she kept telling me her daycare provider was super mean. I figured my daughter was in an adjustment phase, having trouble getting along, so as she adjusted it would pass. After a couple of weeks, she would cling to me when I picked her up and scream and cry as I dropped her off. She was having some slight incontinence issues at the time. One day when we were playing at home, my daughter started role-playing. She was the daycare lady. First she told me, "Okay, your mom and dad are gone, so get off my furniture." I asked where she heard this before. She said at daycare. Then she had my character take a drink from his sippy cup. She demanded, "Okay, everyone hand me your cups, I'm putting them up now." Again, I asked where she had heard this. She said, "Oh, we always do this in the morning at daycare, we get one more drink before you pick me up." Later, she had us pretending to play outdoors. She sang a song about pulling all the dandelions, then putting them in sacks. All the children had to line up at the fence and pull all the grass along their part of the fence. After this we had to line up, put lemon juice and soap on our hands, scrub them hard and dunk them in a bowl to rinse. It was lunchtime now, we had to sit outside. If there was rain, we sit on the floor but never at the table. The list of weirdness went on. I kept asking where she had heard these things. It was always at daycare. When I arrived at daycare, I asked about 2 of these troubling items and was told it just wasn't true. Kids exaggerate a lot. I decided it was a great day for a surprise visit. I parked where I could see the home in the backyard. Sure enough, the kids came out and played exactly 5 minutes. They began pulling weeds followed by pulling grass for 20 minutes. I waited until they were having lunch, then walked into the backyard, confusing the daycare provider and the kids. I stated that my daughter was not a chore slave, what I had witnessed, and what my daughter had told me. Then I demanded my daughter's jacket, sippy cup and other personal items that stayed at the provider's home. We went inside with all the kids who immediately sat on the floor without being told to do so. When I was handed the cup, I asked the provider to come over to the sink. Removing the lid, I showed her the level of the fluid still inside. I poured pink liquid into the sink while explaining the drop of food coloring I had added that morning. I told her I wouldn't even treat my dog as these kids were being treated. I marched out with my daughter. Taking time to phone all the parents I knew, I asked if they suspected their children were in any way mistreated at the daycare. These stories, unusual bruises and more came into the light. More than half of us wrote letters to the state about the situation and our concerns. The daycare was investigated, then closed a week later. Unfortunately, we had been friends with this woman and her family. That ended. The relationship with my daughter was extremely strong after the incident. Have you ever witnessed a life ruined from a small mistake? It did not just ruin her life, it took her life. There was a girl in my class, I won't name her, and I had known her since class 1. She was never a brilliant student, but she was hardworking and her hard work slowly started reflecting in her report card as she climbed up the ranks and came first in our school in class 10. But things started to change when we were in class 11. She fell in love. Now falling for someone is totally fine, but she fell for a guy who had a really bad reputation. Under his influence she transformed from a soft-spoken, studious girl to a bold, ill-mannered girl. She started drinking and often bunked tuitions. The day she failed the first term examinations was the day they celebrated their 3-month anniversary. Things went by like this when one fine morning I got to know from a friend that they broke up. She was devastated after that and slowly slipped into depression. She stopped coming to school and broke contacts with all her friends and kept herself locked up in her room. Her parents were very supportive and understood the situation. They asked her to drop that year and start afresh in a new school. But a month later she was found dead in her room. She hanged herself to death. Reason? She was pregnant. Yes, you heard me right. Her relationship with that guy had escalated to the next level and she got pregnant. So what was her mistake? She did not realize that her career is more important than that guy. She did not realize that the guy for whom her body is more important than her dropping grades is not the right one. She did not realize that no matter what happens she can always confide in her parents. And lastly, she did not realize that no mistake means the end of life. She didn't just end herself that day, she ruined 2 more lives. What is the most clever thing that you have seen somebody do in an emergency? Many years ago when I first became an EMT, 2 boys came into the ER. They were about 13 years old and best buds. They'd been out in the woods, hiking, talking, just hanging out. One boy fell on something and ended up breaking his forearm. The broken bones poked through his arm and in the process, severed the artery running down to the wrist. He was bleeding profusely and would have bled out if his buddy hadn't acted. He had an old ink pen, the kind that comes apart in the middle. He took the pen apart, stuck one end over the top part of the artery and threaded the lower part into the bottom of the pen casing. Then he pushed them together as best he could and applied a tight bandage, handkerchief, to hold the pen ends in place. Then he applied a rough splint made from big sticks on the arm and the other boy's handkerchief. They walked out of the woods to one boy's house where the parents took them to the ER. When the doctor entered the exam room and saw what the uninjured boy had done, he asked who made this bandage and splint. The boy answered, "I did, sir." The doctor asked him where he'd learned to do that. The boy replied, "Boy Scouts, sir." The doctor then said, "Good job, son. You saved your friend's arm and most likely, his life." If the boy had just applied a tourniquet to the arm, it would have most likely have had to be amputated, but because the boy put the pen over the artery, it allowed for blood flow to the hand, keeping it alive and viable. Have you ever been to a restaurant that made you say, "You have got to be kidding me," when they brought out the food? When I was living in Ambergris Caye, a friend of mine took me to a high-end beach resort that was apparently known for its food. Although Ambergris Caye was a beautiful place, I'd have to be honest and say I couldn't find many good places to eat, so I was excited to try this place out. As I'm looking over the menu, the waiter keeps going on and on about how I have to try their 18 inches New York style pizza. People come here just for this pizza. We have people from New York who try it and tell us it's the best pizza they've ever eaten. It was a little more than I wanted to spend on lunch, but how could I argue with that? Plus, the picture on the menu looked like a large 18 inches round piece of heaven. I was sold. I ordered it and we waited. And waited. And waited. And waited. And waited. And waited. Finally, a little over an hour later, I saw the waiter walking towards us with the pizza. But what he put down in front of me was disappointing at best. It wasn't the large 18 inches New York style pizza from the picture. No, it was a 12 inches round piece of burnt heartbreak. Funny thing about that pizza, it had a circular piece of cardboard underneath it that looked just like something that comes underneath the frozen pizza you buy at a grocery store. I'm normally not one to complain about my food. I normally just eat what's given to me and go about my business. But this was ridiculous. When the waiter came back over to check on us, I asked, "So what happened here? You guys run out of ingredients and have to go buy a frozen pizza to serve me?" I could tell I caught him off guard, like he somehow didn't expect me to figure it out. But he confirmed my suspicions, apologized, and offered to remove it from my bill, so that was nice, I guess. Maybe I'm just a diva, but I don't go out to nice restaurants to eat frozen pizza. What is the most difficult decision you have made as a doctor? 106 units. An adult's blood volume 9 times over. The entire hospital's blood bank supply. We had to send to nearby centers for more. We had to put our own trauma center on ambulance diversion until more arrived. After 40 units, the chance of survival drops precipitously. The chance over 100, who knows? Past diminishingly small. Unreported, possibly. The physiologic derangement is simply too great. Banked blood is not like our own. It is cool, watery, weak and deficient. And this toxic cocktail had washed out every native red cell in her body, splashed out itself, and been poured back in again. Every raw surface had begun to ooze. We had already coated her twice. With the blood welling up in spite of my every effort, I threw packs of thick cotton gauze in her chest, trying to stem the torrent. Trying to buy a moment to think. She had the same injury that killed Princess Diana. My partner looked across the table at me, a slight shake to her head. The probe at the head of the bed beeping out a constant register of oxygen saturation suddenly dipped in tone. I glanced, alarmed, over the drape and saw, unmistakably, her eyes opened, her teeth gripping the tube, her lips forming words to the anesthesiologist who hurried to medicate her. A tear sliding down her cheek towards her ear. "She's neuro-intact. She's neuro-intact," I said, this time aloud, as my eyes reconnected with my partner's. "She's neuro-intact," I repeated, as a kind of mantra. My partner nodded. "Okay, let's keep going then," and pulled the packs out. She was 45. Previously healthy. And all there. When I reviewed the case later before a panel of my peers, I argued this made her somehow salvageable. They scoffed. I reconsidered. So why, then, had I wasted so many resources on one woman with such devastating injuries, who ultimately died, as I knew she would? Because I couldn't look her in the eye and tell her no more. Can a doctor say no to abortions? I was assaulted when I was 11. What made it worse, was that 4 weeks later I realized that I was pregnant with my rapist's baby. There was no way that I was going to go through with the pregnancy. I told my grandma and she took me to her doctor. He was a devout Catholic, and refused to help me by referring me for an abortion. My grandma was so angry. She almost hit him. We left the clinic and she took me to a sexual health clinic, where everything is done privately with no risk of your doctor finding anything out. The doctor there was a sweetheart. When my grandma told her my situation, she cried. She gave me a pill that would terminate the pregnancy. The next 72 hours were painful and messy. I stayed at my grandma's because I didn't want my mother to find out. She was already devastated at the fact that her baby had been assaulted and I just couldn't make it worse for her. When everything was over with, my grandma promised me that nothing would ever be said about what happened, and if I mentioned it to her, she would act as though she has no idea of what I was talking about. There were times where I was emotional and wanted to talk to someone about it. With her being the only one who knew about it, I tried to talk to her, but she kept her promise. 17 years later, I'm grateful for what she did for me, and for her secrecy. She saved my life. There was no doubt in my mind that if I'd had to go through with the pregnancy, I was going to end myself. What is something that needs to be said? The other day we were at a restaurant, having our lunch. We had had a late breakfast so weren't particularly hungry, but decided anyway to grab a bite before leaving for the movies. Our daughter was having a plate to herself and eating. The next table lady wasn't amused. She kept staring at my daughter and whispering something to her family. After some time our daughter claimed she was full and I took the leftovers from her plate and put it in mine. The elderly lady then gave me a stare. I smiled. She didn't. Don't mind Beta, she told me, kids need to be fed. It's a good thing to lovingly feed your baby. You get peace when your baby has her tummy full. Telling them to eat themselves, how much sure can you be that they are full? I could see she didn't have satisfyingly well. I smiled again. Forcefully of course. Auntie, she has been eating on her own since she was 15 months old. She knows when her tummy is full. It's good to be independent. She didn't agree and turned to her family saying, this generation parents will never have the same motherly love that they had, that we are becoming too Western. Is that true? Just because this generation parents try to make our kids less dependent on us, we are becoming too Western? What is too Western? My daughter can eat on her own, sleeps on her own. She does all the basic necessities on her own. Sure, we are there to do it for them when they ask us. I have seen 6 to 8-year-olds coming from school and being fed by their parents. Why? Because they never know how much can they eat. I am not judging them, then why do others judge parents like us? I am just making my child not dependent on me. If ever, I need to go somewhere, on an urgent basis, I don't have to worry about her. I know she would miss me, but she would have her food on time and sleep when she wants. Isn't that something valuable to be taught? I left my family and my kids are being raised by a wolf pack. I, 28F, have 3 kids with my ex, 30M. We were never married, but we dated while I was in college. My senior year, I got pregnant and had twins, both boys. He moved me in with him and we were raising our kids together. 14 months after giving birth to the boys, I had a girl. Immediately after I had postpartum depression. I wasn't doing well and I decided to go back home to my parents to try to clear my head. Once home, I saw my old bedroom, my old things, and was kind of reminded of what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to take a gap year to travel, but I had gotten a scholarship to my first choice school and it seemed silly to pass it up. I decided then, this is what I needed to get in the right mental state. I called BD and told him I'm going to Europe for a couple of months. He was incensed and tried to talk me out of it. I explained this is what I needed to go back to being myself and be a better parent and partner. So I went. He called me the first couple of months and kept asking if I was coming back. Eventually he stopped calling. About 6 months in, my parents told me that he had filed to get full custody of the kids. I was mad he didn't tell me before doing it, but I thought I'd at least take full advantage and really see the world and get it out of my system. I traveled for a little over 2 years and visited every continent. When I was done, I really wanted to see my kids, but I felt guilty for not being present in their lives and I didn't want to face my ex. One of the friends I made in my travels offered me a gig as an English teacher at a private school in Thailand. I took the opportunity and spent the next 3 years doing that. This year, I returned stateside and stayed with my parents. They showed me pictures of the kids and told me, my ex let them see the kids a couple of times. I got in touch with him, telling him I was ready to be involved in their lives and he flat out refused. I threatened to sue for custody and he just replied good luck with that and sent my pictures of me partying in Europe. They are not flattering. My parents want to see their grandkids more, but they tell me it's all my fault for not being able to see them. Am I the jerk for trying to see them? Am I the jerk for telling my girlfriend that being depressed is not an excuse for being lazy? I, 29, have always supported my girlfriend, 23. We have been together for 4 years now, and lived together for 1. She has always had anxiety, as well as depression where some months are worse than others. I have supported her through all of this, and understand it is very hard for her. In January she lost her job due to the current world circumstances. By March she hit a low point with not eating as much, crying, irritability, typical traits of depression. I have comforted her as much as possible, and taken care of everything. However, at the beginning of June I was allowed back to work, and since the house has fallen to shambles. I am too tired by the time I come home to do anything, even cook. Most nights we order takeout, and on the rare occasion she makes food. The floors aren't being washed, hoovering isn't being done, laundry is a mountain, and dishes are everywhere. I try keep on top of it, but with work it is almost impossible. She is home. All day. She lies in bed till late afternoon, watches Netflix, eats bowls of cereal, and naps. That's about it. I've tried to gently coax her to do more, and she says she will get to it but never does. I finally snapped, told her I was sick of her doing nothing all day and leaving the housework to me. That if she is here and I am working, she needs to be pulling her weight. She got upset, and said that she wants to but she can never find the motivation. That she is tired all the time. I said I understood she was depressed, but it isn't an excuse to do nothing and be lazy. No one likes housework, but I won't take any more excuses about it. She needs to start doing it or leave. Next day I come home to a clean house and a note from her saying she was sorry, and is going to stay with her mother. Her mom helped her clean before they left. I tried calling but she wouldn't pick up. When I rang the house, her mother answered. And had a lot to say. She was furious. Telling me about how she is struggling and I am making her worse. That I should be supporting her, not ignoring that she is in a bad place. And so on. I was told my girlfriend had been crying all day in her bedroom, and I feel awful. I never wanted to hurt her, I just snapped. I tried to get her mother to give my girlfriend the phone, but she wouldn't speak to me. It feels like a lose-lose situation. On one hand, I know depression results in lack of motivation and cleanliness. And on the other, I can't stand to see our home in such chaos. I've never had depression, so I can't say for sure how bad it truly is. That's why I find it more difficult to 100% empathize. Am I the jerk for telling her depression isn't an excuse? How do I, 38M, reassure my wife, 34F, that I'm not having an affair with my assistant, 24F, at work? So about 6 months ago I got a promotion at my job, and with the promotion I also got an assistant who I'll call Marcy. When I mentioned to my wife, who I'll call Emma, that I was getting an assistant, she did make a couple of jokes about sleeping with my secretary, but I didn't think anything about it at the time. Looking back, I'm thinking that she was actually being serious and was already suspicious from the start just of the whole concept. But what happened to make me make this post is that over the last few weeks I noticed Emma acting like she had a problem with Marcy. If I talked about my day at work and I mentioned Marcy's name, Emma rolled her eyes or made a snarky comment. I stopped mentioning Marcy, but then Emma would ask about her specifically and still have some rude little comment to make. So finally I asked Emma if something had happened. Elle was thinking that maybe she had called for me and Marcy had been short with her on the phone or something. Instead, Emma brought up a random Friday back in January when she stopped by wanting to surprise me by taking me out to lunch, and caught me having lunch with Marcy. So to explain, Marcy and I have a weekly meeting on Fridays where we go over our projects and whatnot for the week, and during these meetings we order lunch and eat in my office. To me this seems completely normal and professional, but Emma thought it signified that we're having an affair. I tried to explain to Emma that I don't follow this logic, but she just kept saying that it obviously looked suspicious, and then she brought up another time when I was late coming home and didn't have a good excuse as to why not. I don't even remember the night that she's talking about. I can only assume I was late because of traffic or something like that, because I certainly wasn't cheating on her or doing anything else nefarious. But what can I do to reassure Emma that her concerns are unfounded? We've been together for 4 years, married for 1.5 years, and I've never cheated on her or done anything to make her think I was untrustworthy. I have no idea how to reason with her here, because from what I can see she's basing all of this on the fact that she just doesn't like me having a female assistant. And I don't want to fire Marcy or anything like that just to make Emma feel better, because she's good at her job and hasn't done anything wrong either. My husband is mad that I have a higher IQ, and he says that he is not attracted to me anymore. As the title says. He came home one day and gave me logins to some IQ test and I scored higher than him. First he was in disbelief, then a bit sulky. I thought the whole thing was stupid, and I never thought or experienced that I'm smarter, and I never understood the logic of these tests. Anyway, since then he has changed. He doesn't want to cuddle or kiss me or anything. Last Saturday we attended a birthday party for my little nephew, and my husband spent the evening chatting up my sister-in-law's sister, who is very pretty. When we got home I just had it up to here with him and started crying because he ignored me for at least 3 weeks, and now he is flirting with other people. He denied everything. He denied being changed with me since the test, but I wasn't backing down this time. I told him that I wasn't stupid and that he stopped being affectionate since that damn day. He finally admitted that he was turned off by the fact and wasn't attracted to me. I asked him if he still wasn't attracted to me and why. I haven't changed. I'm still me. He apologized and said that he would put his shit together and that he knows how silly this is. But he has been wary around me since. I still think he is turned off by me. So we are taking a break. I told my husband that I have had enough. He has obviously had a change of heart, and I'm not going to be there to witness him falling out of love with me. The mere thought is painful. He called me drama and then said that while his reaction was bitter and stupid, I'm taking a huge leap in the wrong direction since he already acknowledged his mistake and is working towards being better. I told him that it wasn't true. He is still avoiding me like I'm a leper. I also asked to see his phone. He has been talking a bit too friendly to a co-worker. It started immediately after this whole test thing, like he was determined to hurt me, or I don't know what he was trying to accomplish otherwise. In one of the texts he complained that I was neglectful and full of myself. How ironic to pretend that I'm the neglectful one when he has not even kissed my cheek in over a month. I felt that it was a matter of time before he would cheat on me. I'm not staying for that. I asked him to move out. This morning he texted me that he loved me and that he was sorry. He didn't know what he was trying to prove to me or to himself, but that he loves me and finds me very attractive. I call bullshit, honestly. He has been so cold with me, flirting with everyone that looked his way, and now he is all loving and affectionate. He wants us to try therapy, and he suggested that he needed to work on his insecurities with a therapist too. We have a daughter together whose is 8 months old that we love more than anything, but I don't know. Why does it feel like it is over and that I don't trust him anymore? I feel like I know now what he's capable of doing when faced with adversity, and going through rough patches is inevitable in every marriage. I don't like his method of dealing with it. I'm too intelligent to put up with this. How did your marriage end and what age were you? I met my now ex-husband when I was 14. We married when I was 32. I was never in any hurry to marry. The very first night of my honeymoon I wrapped my arms around my new husband and told him how much I loved and how happy I was to be his wife. He gently put his hands on my shoulders, pushed me back a bit, looked me in the eyes and said, "You do realize that I never have or never will love you." After 24 years marriage and constant mental and verbal abuse, I gave up the hope that someday he would love me like I loved him. I could no longer take the constant berating. The last straw for me was him patting my developmentally disabled niece who had been with us for 22 years on the top of her head and calling her mentally weak. The very next day I filed for divorce. I had become stronger and he could no longer belittle me. So when he switched to her, it was a done deal. 3 days after I filed my niece and I packed our most precious belongings and a few garbage bags of clothing and left. I will never regret my decision to leave, even though we ended up in a couple of terrible situations, including homelessness in Minnesota in the winter. We now live in an apartment and are in an address confidentiality program. He still after 4 years takes me to court over and over again to fight having to pay spousal support. My marriage started filled with my love and ended because of his hatred for me and everything I cherished. I am done, and I'm heartbroken. I have no one. I have been married for 15 years. I have known my wife since I was 8. We have 3 daughters together. 17, 14, and 11. I'm tired of feeling like I'm an outsider in my relationships with all of them. I'm just an ATM and taxi service to my kids. My wife hasn't kissed me in 6 months. She has not said that she loves me in 1.5 years. No matter how much I communicate, try to plan anything or do anything, it is always shot down, forgotten, or dismissed. I don't get angry and don't yell. I don't get physical. I like to splurge during birthdays and Mother's Day. I throw parties and give gifts and try to show how much I love them. I get a lukewarm, thanks, and if I'm lucky, a side hug that lasts 0.0001 seconds. This week was the breaking point. Father's Day. I wake up to an empty house. Odd. No note, nothing was written on the calendar, and nothing said beforehand. I sent a text, and I get back. I took the girls out for a spa day, don't wait up. Then nothing, literally nothing. Dinner time comes around, and they get home. How their say was, it was fine. I ask what they would like for dinner. Nothing, we already ate at one of my favorite restaurants. Cool, whatever. There is no mention of it being Father's Day. No, I love you, how are you? Nothing. Fast forward to Wednesday. Which was my birthday. Nothing. Literally again, nothing. I suggested plans. They get shot down. I suggested food. Nope, shot down. Ask about watching a movie, they are all too busy, they just sat on their phones doing nothing. Now to Thursday night. I'm in bed. My wife is next to me. She rolls over and says in a crappy tone, "Oh, your birthday was the other day. I guess you expect to have sex." That broke something in me, best of my memory of how it went down. I said no, I don't expect sex. At this point, I don't expect anything anymore. Her, what is that supposed to mean? So I started asking her questions. When was the last time we shared a kiss? Like a week? Nope, it was in December, and it was during her parents' holiday party. When was the last time we had sex? The beginning of the year? Nope, wrong, it has been over a year. She was adamant that we did it in February. I was dealing with my mom's health and her passing. So I said something like, "You may have had sex but it wasn't with me. When was the last time you said you love me?" I say it all the time. Not to me, check your messages / you don't say it to me face to face. Well, you should just know I do. When was the last time we went on a date? Long pause. Her, you're being unfair. Emotions turned on fully. I was crying and raising my voice at this point. It asks her how? She can't answer. I asked her how wanting any sign of love from anyone in the house is unfair. If expecting anything for my birthday or Father's Day was unfair. She got an oh shit look. Yeah, you forgot that as well. I'm not an ATM, I'm not a taxi service, I'm not a punching bag. She asked why this was coming up out of the blue. It didn't. I have tried to talk to my family and again get dismissed or ignored. I brought up examples. I got an "I didn't know you were serious. I didn't know it was such a big deal." I left saying something to the point of, "If you want to pretend that I'm invisible and don't exist, fine. You don't have to pretend anymore." I left the house at almost midnight. On Thursday / Friday morning. Haven't been home since. I'm not sure what to do now. I'm finally sober enough to think, but I don't know what to do. First time drinking in over 15 years by the way, and I'm not going to drink anymore. I love my family. But I can't keep this up. I don't know what more I can do. I think they would be happier without me. They already act like I don't exist. I can't be the one who is blamed for everything. If I truly am the problem, then me not being there should fix it. I can't do it anymore. I have tried to be a good provider, a good partner, and a good dad. Never missed an event of our kids. Never prioritized work. I kept good hours so I could see them more. Took on more responsibility to better our life and future. But, it is never appreciated. It is never enough. I am never enough. I only have one message from my wife: I'm sorry for making you feel that way. We all love you, and we are here for you when you want to come home and talk. That is it. No other messages. No calls. Nothing from the kids. I feel like if they really wanted me there, they would try reaching out more. All of the kids have their own phone. I don't know what she told them. I'm sure they heard me raise my voice. Me raising my voice would have definitely got their attention since I never do. I'm sure they heard me leave. I just don't know. When did a false accusation backfire on the accuser? My friend James was accused of getting physical with a boy. James had probably the worst lie told about him by the 13-year-old son of his then girlfriend. They'd been together for approximately 9 months, and up until that point, he'd had a great relationship with the son. However, the son obviously missed the good old days when he had his mother all to himself, and it would appear that nostalgia got the better of him. It started with little allegations against James, like he'd gotten angry at the boy and raised his voice. These were dismissed immediately by the mother, as she had been in the same room or within earshot when the incidents were alleged to have occurred. As these allegations were baseless and always failed to land, the son upped the ante somewhat and told his mother that he felt physically threatened by James. James is the type of guy who always walks around with a smile and is liked by all. I have known him for over 25 years and have never seen him get into a fight or raise his voice or ever get angry with anyone, and especially not a child. He is one of life's gentle souls. I honestly believe the world would be a better place if there were more people like him in it. He was, however, concerned and upset about the allegations, and he tied himself in knots trying to figure out why the boy was saying these things about him. Each time he spoke to his then girlfriend about it, she would play it all down and tell him that he shouldn't worry, as children lie and exaggerate all the time. Apparently, For some reason, she never spoke to the son about what the implications of lying could have, and I am certain that had she done, what happened next would have been avoided. The son went away one weekend to stay with his grandparents, his father's parents. James had a day out planned with his girlfriend on Saturday. Still, the local constabulary had other ideas, and they swooped in and arrested him as they had received a complaint from the grandparents that James had been physically abusing the boy. He was handcuffed, taken away, and spent the day and night in the cells before being released under investigation. He could not go to his girlfriend's, so he stayed with me, and I went to collect some clothes and his work swipe card. Although this was futile, as he was immediately suspended from his college lecturing job for safeguarding reasons. The girlfriend was home when I called around, and despite being upset and absolutely certain of his innocence, she, to me, didn't fully understand the ramifications of the false allegations. Her attitude was, "We know he's innocent so that the police will know too. They understand that children lie and exaggerate all the time." When I returned home, I found James was applying some form of rudimentary first aid to himself. He had left the house to get some milk and was accosted by the boy's father. I have no idea how he knew where I lived or that James was staying with me, but he found him nonetheless and administered some rough justice on him. James tried to reason with him, but the father was having none of it and broke his nose and fractured his eye socket for good measure. The girlfriend's parents, who incidentally loved James and were thrilled that she had finally found someone decent, had their suspicions about the boy's allegations and decided to question him themselves gently. The boy eventually cracked when he was informed that his father would almost certainly be kicked out of the army for assaulting James in response to the allegation he'd made. He admitted that he'd made the whole thing up as he was jealous that he had to share his mother with someone else as he liked having her all to himself. He also admitted that he liked having complete control over his mother, and he saw James' arrival as a threat to the status quo, so he hatched a plan to get rid of him and told his other grandparents that James had assaulted him. They understandably hit the roof and pointed out to him that he was almost 14 years old and was old enough to know that lies can have far-reaching consequences. They immediately marched him to the police station, where he tearfully withdrew his allegation and informed them that he'd invented the whole thing. He admitted that James had never laid a finger on him nor raised his voice, or had shown any form of aggression towards him. The investigating officer severely reprimanded the boy and told him he would remember his name for future reference should they cross paths when he became an adult. Unfortunately, despite exposing the lie, the college terminated James' contract, again citing safeguarding. He took them to a tribunal and won the case. He was in line for a hefty payout but pleaded with them to let him continue to teach, and he dropped the whole thing. Sadly, they wouldn't see sense, and despite the compensation, his career went up in smoke. The students lost a fine lecturer, and the institution was poorer for no longer having such an asset as James. The father was indeed kicked out of the army and was also charged with assault, which is ironic considering this was the charge leveled at James, and was given a suspended sentence, which of course, means he will carry that wherever he goes and has now struggled to find employment. The mother's parents were rightfully disgusted that their grandchild could do such a thing as cut him out of the will. This was bad news for the boy as they were very wealthy business people, and he was looking forward to living off their fortune so that he didn't have to worry about minor inconveniences such as working for a living. They saw James how we all see him, a thoroughly decent person who loved that woman and her son with all his heart. They were devastated that the selfish actions of her son had stolen her happiness and robbed her of the man that they had always hoped that she would find. The grandparents on the other side, the ones who called the police, sought James out and apologized to him, which was decent of them. The relationship they now have with their former daughter-in-law is non-existent as she resents them for not speaking to her in the first instance, which of course, could have prevented the chain reaction that was about to follow. They hardly see their grandson anymore as they are also disgusted by his lies and selfishness. James, and this is probably an indication of the type of person he is, he considered getting back with the mother but realized that sometimes some things are just too broken to mend. She is a single mother again, and I have seen her in the street on occasion. She is devastated at what happened and wishes things were how they were. Unfortunately, she is unlikely to find anyone else anytime soon as her name is radioactive to prospective partners due to her son's lie. She told me that she's been on a few dates since, but as soon as the guy hears what happened in her last relationship, they ended immediately. She told me she loves her son regardless and just hates the lie that he told, which is fair. James has found work as a personal tutor and is also a contributor to a few business journals. He's doing okay but is still gutted about what happened. He feels that despite his innocence, he is not entirely without fault, that perhaps he shouldn't have been so affectionate to the mother when the boy was around, as it probably fueled his jealousy. Not a happy ending for anyone involved, and this all came about because of one teenager's lie. Very sad indeed. What is the biggest mistake you made as a 17-year-old that you warn others about? At 17 years old, I took out my first $5,000 in student loan debt. I don't think student loan debt is a mistake. I think taking it out when you're 17 might be. When I was 17, I certainly thought I had a plan. I'd get my teaching certification and then have a stable enough job to pay the loans back, hopefully. And it wouldn't be that much money. It's good debt, everyone told me. It'll be worth it. But $5,000 turned into $20,000 into nearly $30,000. And my plans fell apart pretty quickly when I realized, as many students do, that I didn't like my study area much. I wasn't prepared for the possibility, so I chose a school that was only good at what I originally came to study. I ended up in a seriously underwhelming English department, pursuing a degree I didn't care for all that much but liked better than I was studying before. Then I dropped out. Now I'm sitting on $30,000 of student debt, money I could have spent in about 100 better ways. I wish I had taken a gap year to sort myself out before college. But that wasn't offered as an option when I was 17. I was explicitly warned time and time again not to take a gap year. People said I'd never return and get my degree if I started working. I listened because that's what you do when you're 17. You take advice and make the best decision possible, and I can't fault myself for that. In hindsight, though, I, and people like me, could have benefited from a break between high school and college. Some kids know exactly what they want and have no problem transitioning, others, like me, could really use some extra time to grow up, decide the direction they want to go and think critically about the best way to get there. I would have been better off paying for a writer's intensive or online marketing course than college. I wish 17-year-old me could have known that. Have you ever experienced karma in real life? This happened during my 4th semester exam, 3 years ago. 8 a.m. As usual, due to unpredictable yet lovely, Bangalore weather, it started pouring down heavily as soon as I reached the bus stop I used to take BMTC buses regularly. I was in a fix. My exam was at 9:30 a.m. and college was an hour away from home, so I decided to take a cab instead, but luck had to play its part and there were no cabs available. Finally I decided to take an auto, and after constant rejections and overpricing by auto drivers, I finally got one. That's when a man came rushing and requested me if he could take the auto instead of me. He looked really worn out and tensed. I thought it was probably a case of hospital emergency or something and hesitantly agreed. 10:02 a.m. I walk into the college with half mind, since the latest we could enter was by 10 a.m. and as I kept rushing up to the exam hall, I had all sorts of thoughts in my mind. What will I tell my parents? What if I can't write this? I'll have to write it again in 6th semester. How can I sit for placement? Can I cook some bullshit up so that the invigilator lets me inside? 10:05 a.m. I reach class, scared out of my wits. I take the hall ticket, stationery, and rush inside, and as soon as I was about to plead the invigilator to let me in, I looked up at him and guess what? He was the same man who took the auto. With a smiling face he let me in and wished me luck. I was so relieved. Karma really does play its tricks, doesn't it? What is the most hurtful thing your parents said to you? My parents spent $20,000 to have me. My mother could not conceive after having my 2 older brothers due to scar tissue. My dad was able to pay out of pocket to get it removed. She wanted a daughter so badly. Luckily, I was born a female. Thank God my parents were wealthy when they were married, or I wouldn't have been born. Skip forward 4 years. They went through a nasty divorce that screwed with me. I'm talking about cheating, partying, and being left for days alone with my brothers, who were 10 and 12. I became very antisocial and introverted. My mother found a piece of shit boyfriend after guilting us kids about how poor she was now. I'm certain she and my dad regretted having children. One day my mom took me and my younger siblings to her boyfriend's family party when I was 8 or 9. I was nervous around other kids, and my little siblings didn't want me around, so I went to my mother to hang out with her and be comforted. My mother told me to get away from her. She was too busy trying to be a social princess like she used to be. I ended up staying in the car for the remainder of the party. Once they piled in to leave, her boyfriend said, "What's wrong with her?" She responded, "She's an antisocial beach." That shattered my soul as a very young child. I have never had a good relationship with my mother because of our polar opposite socialization. I wasn't the daughter she thought $20,000 would give her. One of the worst parts is no one would believe how she treated us growing up. She refuses to acknowledge what she did. It still hurts, and I'm going on 27. I'm considering leaving my wife because of her weight. Alright, before I get called in butthead, let me explain. I love my wife. I think she's incredibly beautiful, and even more so after she gave birth to our son 3 years ago. The problem is that she put on a good amount of baby weight, obviously, and never lost it. She instead started to gain more weight and was overall pretty depressed. I initially assumed it was PPD and suggested she go to therapy for it. She went to therapy and got some antidepressants. It took her a while to find the right ones, and she's been fine mentally since she found them. Physically is a different story, however. She has continued over the past 3 years to gain weight. The problem isn't anymore that I'm not attracted to her, but she will pass if she continues to gain weight. She is currently 5 feet 2 inches, about 260 pounds with a BMI close to 50. I don't know what I can do. I feel like I've tried everything. I've asked her to go to the gym with me, go on a diet with me, not buy fast food, have some active hobbies. She's turned down every single one of these ideas. I feel like I don't have any choice but to give her an ultimatum. Either she genuinely tries to lose the weight or I leave. I can't watch the women I love and mother of my child slowly kill herself. I don't want to be the dude who gives an ultimatum, but I see no other choice. I guess I just wanted to ask if I'm being in butthead or if Therese any other way I could go about this. Everyone keeps telling me you can be overweight and healthy. You're right. But no, you cannot be obese and healthy, at least not long term. Heart disease runs in my wife's family, and while your weight might not affect you, being overweight is directly linked to heart disease. I understand weight loss isn't easy. I used to be overweight, but my concern isn't that she's not the same way she looked when we got together. It's that she may not live to see our son become a teenager. And so cut to 5 months later, because I was getting past the point of no return with my wife's weight. Now expectedly I got called in buttholy and a weenie and every other name under the book for even mentioning it. But I also got some real good feedback and decided before I made any real decision I would sit her down and let her know how I was truly feeling. Because at that point we had multiple conversations addressing it, but none of them lead anywhere. So after we put my son to sleep, I asked my wife if we could talk for a moment in the kitchen. Now I'm not gonna lie, the conversation was probably the hardest one I've ever had. Because despite what everyone believed, I do love my wife. Now I don't want to get into every detail, but the basis of the conversation was that I needed her to at least try and be healthier. I also think she needed to hear how serious I was about this, and when I told her I was even thinking about separating, I think it really put the nail in the coffin. It's been about 5 months since then and I'm proud to say my wife has lost 35 ducking pounds. I am so proud of her, it's effing ridiculous. The first month was a effing hurdle and a half, but now she's going steady and losing weight at a healthy moderate rate. Recently she even started to exercise with me. In the morning I usually jog, but since her knees are somewhat shot 3 days a week we go walk a mile or two, together and either talk or just listen to music together. I know it sounds corny to say, but she even seems happier and her confidence is coming back as well. What's the dumbest thing someone accused you of? Recently, myself and the driver, both female, had an altercation on the road with another driver and his GF. We'd cut him off while leaving our parking spot because he was going way too fast, like 30 kilometers per hour over the speed limit. So when my friend checked her rear view he was far away, and he wasn't happy about having to slow down once he got right behind us. Anyway, this crazy asshole proceeds to get angry and race to follow us on the road, until he stops right next to us at a red light. Then proceeds to insult us and threaten us to beat us up. At that point, his girlfriend tells him no, don't, because then they'll call the police just because we're black, and she went on about how we on the other hand wouldn't get in trouble BC we're white. And I was like, if your boyfriend beats us up, maybe we'd call the police for assault rather than for the color of your skin, and if you got arrested, that would also be for assault? Them being black had nothing to do with the rest? I was kinda baffled at the mental gymnastics here. Or maybe she was just trying to find a way to calm him down? Thankfully people don't all try to make themselves look like victims under the guise of bigotry when they're the attackers. Was kinda funny in retrospect. May, shortly after moving to our neighborhood, I met the aging lady 2 doors down. Her name was Cynthia. We exchanged a few pleasantries and then she warned me about the guy who lived in the house between us. She went on to tell me that Wade had hopped over her fence and taken a big dump in her backyard. Over the next few years, I had gotten to know Wade, but always had that crazy image in my mind of him scaling her chain link fence, dropping his drawers, and squeezing one out. Eventually, I had to ask him about it. So Wade, your next door neighbor once told me that you took a crap in her yard. His eyes popped wide and he started laughing. Turns out, she had warned him of the guy who lived on the other side of her. She had told him that Mike had jumped over her fence and crapped in her lawn. Soon after, a couple moved in across the street. Cynthia quickly struck up a conversation with them and added me to the list of serial poopers. As far as I know, nobody has actually climbed over her fence and dropped a load in her backyard. But hey, I can't wait to hear about who's next. I can't never look at my boyfriend the same. LD boyfriend and I have been together 9 months. I went to see him 2 weeks ago and things haven't been the same since. He is the more intimate one in our relationship, whereas I enjoy intimacy, but it's not something that is top of mind for me. This trip had already left me with some weird vibes because unlike our other trips I genuinely felt unconsidered. Little things like not going grocery shopping for the things I asked for before I got to this house, which was just water really. He lives in an area where it's 90+ degrees every day in the summer and no air conditioning. He isn't a frequent water drinker, so I asked ahead of time for him to stock up, but he didn't, so we ended up running out on the 3rd day. When it came to intimacy it felt like most of it was on his terms, which was different from all our other encounters. Intimacy with him was honestly the best I ever had before this experience. We had intimacy multiple times that week and there was barely any foreplay, which he knows is a big thing for me. For us, it used to be that he would try to get me to orgasm first as his was guaranteed, but this time there was none of that. The time I was there I only orgasmed once, which was also the only time he went down on me and we used a toy. These would usually be his go-to and instead I had to ask him to use the toy. By the last night I felt so dejected I barely wanted to have intimacy, but given it was our last night when it came up I said why not. This night was the worst. Without hesitation or any warm-up he just started trying to put it in. I made a comment about trying to do a warm-up first and he just chuckled and kept going until he was in. From there it just felt weird. Eventually he put me on top, but I was just so out of it that I go off as quickly as I could. I asked him if he was okay with not finishing and he chuckled again and said he was fine, so we just spooned for a bit with the intention of going to sleep. A couple minutes later I felt him adjusting to get inside me. At this point I didn't say anything and sort of froze up. He got inside and started going, but I just laid there. He paused to ask me if I was okay to do this and I said something of a yay or yes, but in my head it felt pointless saying anything else as he was still inside me while asking this mid-stroke. We continued and I just kept burying my head in the pillow because I felt myself on the brink of tears, just wanted it to be over. Once he done, I ran to bathroom and just cried before cleaning myself up. By the time I got back to the room he was asleep. I tried to get some sleep as well, but given everything going on in my brain and us having to be up in 3 hours I didn't get much. We had a 2.5 hours drive the next day and we didn't talk much there and haven't talked much since I've been back home. Everything just feels different and I have no clue where to go from here. My wife told me someone else is her soulmate. My wife, M, met her best friend, Chuck, in high school. They became close friends and Chuck came out to M as gay. M was supportive. A year or so later Chuck came out to his parents. They disowned him and kicked him out, and Chuck ended up living with M and her parents for the rest of high school. M and I started dating after college and she told me all about Chuck and how close they were and how he was like a brother. I met Chuck and we got along and became friends. Chuck is a good guy. At the time Chuck was dating a guy, they ended up moving in together about the same time that M and I got engaged. M and I have been married for 5 years now. I'm a project manager and took on a year-long project in another city. I have to leave at 5:30 a.m. every morning and get home around 6:30 p.m. and I had a long talk about my job before I took on this project. We knew it would be a sacrifice for me to be working so much, but I'm getting more money than I ever thought I would. After this project we can pay off our student debt and start trying to have a baby. We both agreed the money was worth it, since it's only a year. That year will be up in late November. In March, Chuck caught his boyfriend cheating. He was devastated. Em immediately told him he could move in with us. I was fine with him moving in, but not happy that Em didn't even discuss it with me first. Chuck was pretty broken up and Em was giving him lots of love and attention. I was fine with it, because I know how much she loves Chuck and he did need her. I also did my best to support him and make him feel loved. For a while this was fine, but as time went on, Em has continued to pour all of her attention into Chuck. Sometimes I get home from work and neither of them are there, and I found out they went to a movie or out to dinner together. I don't think there is anything romantic or sexual between them, but it has been annoying that I get left out of all the plans. The past few weeks several things have happened. The three of us went to a party and someone joked about Chuck being our third wheel and Em said Chuck is not the third wheel. I said what? And she said I've known Chuck longer than I've known you. A week or so after that, Em and Chuck went out dancing one night. I had to work the next day so I stayed home. I woke up at about 3 a.m. and Em was not in bed. I went and found her and Chuck cuddled up on the couch asleep with the TV on. Both of those things made me uncomfortable. I also realized I had been working so much I was just sort of letting Em and Chuck plan everything, and I had not planned a date night in a while. I decided I needed to be more active and so I planned a date night for last Friday. When I first told Em, she was excited, as we have not been on a date, just the two of us, in a while. Friday I got home at 6:30 and Em and Chuck were not there. I took a shower and got ready. About 7:15 I finally called Em, as we had reservations at 8. She answered and when I asked where she was she said her and Chuck had gone shopping and were getting some dinner. I was kind of stunned and asked about our date. She laughed and said, "Oh, I forgot." Oh well. And that was that. She didn't even invite me to join them. So, a point I should make here, my dad was very controlling of my mom and had an anger problem where he would yell and throw things. He never threw things at us, but it was still scary as a kid. I have worked very hard to not be like him. I've tried to never be controlling of Em or tell her what to do. I also tend to shut down when I get angry. When Em forgot our date I was mad so I didn't say anything right then, but I knew I needed to address how I was feeling. So later that evening I told her we needed to talk. I had written down some things so I could stay focused. I started by saying that I loved Chuck and he was always welcome in our home, but that I felt like our marriage was suffering and we needed to work on us. Em blew up. She thought I was attacking Chuck. I guess I didn't word things well, and she started defending him and attacking me. We have never had a big fight before, we always talk and work things out. I was stunned that she was attacking me. She said some awful things. Then she said Chuck is my soulmate and you just have to get used to that. I just shut down. I didn't even know how to process that. I love Em more than anything in the world, but in that moment I realized she loves Chuck more than she loves me. I thought Em and I were soulmates, but to hear her say she considers someone else her soulmate has been devastating. I don't remember the rest of the talk. She huffed off after a while and slept on the couch. Her and Chuck left together on Saturday and were gone most of the day. When they got back she acting like nothing had happened. On Sunday she even made a small joke and batted her eyes at me, something she does when she's flirting with me. Normally I love it, but this time it just made me sick. I told her this was a busy week at work and I was just going to stay at a hotel near the job site, something I've done a few times before, so I haven't seen her since Sunday night. I don't know what to do. Typing all of this up has made me realize I am really burned out with all of this travel. Maybe I checked out too much and haven't given her enough attention. But how do I move forward knowing she will never love me as much as I love her? They shot my girlfriend, so you won't believe what I did to them. This all happened the summer of my sophomore year of high school and the end of my junior year. So I'm walking with my girlfriend at the time and a few of our friends back to my house from our local park in the middle of summer vacation. The neighborhood the park is in doesn't have sidewalks, so we're walking in the street casually moving out the way as cars need to get past until this K5 Blazer. In case you're unfamiliar with them, K5 Blazers are basically SUVs where you can take the top off and be left with what I consider a pickup truck with seats in the bed. With this obnoxious custom paint job is behind us, we move to the side thinking nothing of it until they slowly pull up beside us and four guys with squirt guns spray us with God knows what. Me and friends decided we would be better at just not pondering that. They then speed off while some of my friends throw rocks and yell and I try to calm down my now crying girlfriend. Fast forward a couple months after school has started again. I realize the D-bags that sprayed us goes to the same school as us after see the obnoxious Blazer in the student parking lot and decide to start to hatch a plan for revenge. I wait out the rest of the school year till 2 weeks before our last day of school and it's now sufficiently warm for my plan. I go to the grocery store, buy 2 dozen eggs and 2 gallons of milk and let them sit outside and ferment in the heat so everything was nice and rancid and disgusting, perfect to use for revenge for what they had done last year. Last day of school I skipped my first class of the day and what I had thought would be the hardest part of this was actually fairly simple because the D-bags left their window down allowing for easy access to the Blazer, so I artfully plastered the insides of the truck with the rotten eggs and then poured the milk all over the seats and floor, making sure to get some on the steering wheel. Walked down the street too. Ditched the evidence at a nearby convenience store trash can and went to my second class to let my revenge ferment some more till the end of the day when I gathered all the friends so we can see their reactions, and they were indeed priceless, well worth waiting the entire school year to act on my plan. The owner of the truck opened the door, stared inside and then flipped out while everyone coming out of the school stared and the owner's friends trying to help scoop out the chunks of milk and egg in disgust. So satisfying. Morale of the story: revenge is best served after fermenting in the sun for 2 weeks. My brother ended his own life to get back at my mom. By simply googling my dead brother's name, I uncovered the pro-revenge he attempted to exact on our mother by unaliving himself. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. My oldest brother committed suicide in 2003 at age 48 without leaving a note. Here's the story. My oldest brother grew up a conflicted man. He was brilliant and honest, but he had a very volatile relationship with our mother that seemed to center around her attempts to hold on to and control money. We all felt this as we were very poor, but my oldest brother seemed to take her efforts to deny us the basics of life personally. The rest of us felt that our meager lifestyle of yard sale clothes, no toys, barber school haircuts, dented cans and stale bread was simply a product of our poverty. By the time he reached his early 20s, he moved out but continued to stop by and try to engage our mother in arguments designed to teach her the errors in her thinking. This never went well. He eventually went to Brown University on a full scholarship and began teaching in an inner city setting. It was at this point, around 1987, that he began his descent into depression and major mental illness. He self-medicated with alcohol and anti-depression meds. I could see the changes in him monthly. By 1996, he was not the same person that I grew up with. He picked verbal fights, saw enemies everywhere and began to act out at his job. I later learned that it was around this point, and I'll explain how later, he decided to commit suicide. But he had unfinished business with my mother, so he concocted a twisted scheme aimed to devastate her at her weakest moment. He purchased a secret life insurance policy, named my mother as the beneficiary without her knowledge, and secretly paid the premium every month despite he and his wife having deep financial issues. Of course his wife knew nothing of the suicide plans or the policy. Insurance policies have a lengthy waiting period before they will pay out in the case of a suicide, but that's okay because my brother wanted to have a little fun before unaliving himself anyway. His fun included adopting the concern level of a honey badger and messing with every teacher, student, administrator and custodian he disliked. His devastating intellect was his weapon and he used it to embarrass and shock his targets. He eventually was suspended multiple times for verbally assaulting a janitor and for allowing his 7th grade students to cut his hair and drive his car. He also created drama by telling stories of bar fights with famous people and lying to get out of attending meetings. He had become an out-of-control prick and was drinking every day. His wife held it together, but she was beginning to crack under the pressure. All the while, my brother was fine because he knew it would all be over soon and he was living his new life of giving 0 Fs. And his plan to screw with my mother was coming along fine. I attempted to get him into numerous programs. I even cut ties with him for my own children and told him that all he needed to do was to get into a program and, even if he failed, could resume our close contact. He opted to continue his rampage. Our parents saw no real need for concern, so they didn't join with me. My father even expressed anger at me for me giving him that ultimatum. Around 2000, he began predicting his own death to his classes. Knowing that 7th graders are very gullible, he shrouded it with being told by psychics that he would die at home and in a year that ended with a 3. This is what I learned by Googling his name about 8 years after his death. When I did, a link to a video game forum popped up and a PM 8-year-old post by one of his students had made about his teacher dying. This is when I realized that my brother's suicide was planned years before he did it. I emailed that student and he gave me the whole story of my brother riveting the class on several occasions with tales of his own death. Here's the intended revenge plan and it's 8 years too late. Exposure. In 2011, my mother passed. My brother's death 8 years earlier began her mental and physical breakdown. All she wanted to know was why? Of course we had no idea why. But her death triggered a record search at Prudential Insurance where she had her own policy. My dad had begun the wheels in motion by filing for her payout and the search kicked back my brother's name because that was, ironically, where he had his secret life insurance policy. The agent asked my dad who the person who came back in the search was and my dad stated that it was his oldest son who had committed suicide back in 2003. You see, my brother, despite his brilliance, didn't know how life insurance worked and he assumed that his death would somehow cause his policy to force a payout to my mother. This would have happened when all of us were deep in contemplation as to why he would unalive himself, and right then my mother would then get the check. The check was his suicide note directly to my mother alone. And it was the one thing that has dogged their relationship forever. Money. But the insurance company did not know of his death in 2003. They assumed he just allowed the policy to lapse. My brother's wife knew nothing of the policy and neither did my mother. My dad, who is 87 and failing, never connected the dots as he doesn't know of my brother predicting his own death. My father provided Prudential with a copy of the death certificate of both my brother and my mother and they verified that the policy was in force at the time of my brother's suicide and sent my dad the benefits check. I've never told my dad any of this as it would probably unalive him. I shared the details with my middle brother and he agrees that this was exactly what my oldest brother was up to. What's the worst mistake anyone can make? I indirectly caused the death of my abusive ex-stepdad. When I was 9, my mom met a man who for the sake of the story we'll call Jay. Jay was an unremarkable man, he was a chef and he was from New York living in South Philadelphia at the time. My mom being emotionally unstable decided to give him a try after lots of past relationships not working out. And I feel it is a good time to mention my dad is dead from overdose. So my mom was desperate for someone to be that guy who is good for her and me. She gives Jay a chance and out of nowhere boom, Jay has cancer. Came out of the blue and my mom's heartstrings were pulled by him and she was attached to him for good. I was 9 at the time so OFC I was a stupid kid who never thought my mom could be wrong. Well, I didn't notice her getting black eyes but my grandfather did. So one day at a corner store in my neighborhood he decided to beat Jay black and blue. He was stuck on the couch for days and looking back it brings a smile to my face. But he convinced my mom that my grandmother manipulated my grandfather to beat him up so we have to move. After an intervention was held my mom had decided to move. We packed our things in our van and I held my 90-pound Rottweiler on my lap and we moved to effing Florida. Chapter 2 effing Florida. I'm gonna admit, life kinda sucked here. For 5 years I was stuck in such a dumpster fire of a state with no family support. My mom was abused daily and I was mostly mentally abused. I also lost my great-grandmother at this time and I wanted to go back to Philly for the funeral but Jay said no. Eventually in 2021 my mom left Jay and then the worst night of my life happened. Chapter 3 Halloween 2021 I was still in Florida, shocker, and I went trick or treating with a younger friend. At this point in time my mom was paying for Jay's new apartment because she just wanted him gone. Well, he broke into our apartment, took my puppy for a walk and smashed everything. My mom decided instead of calling the police she would confront him, with me, alone. So we went and as a precaution my mom had a knife on her. We went and when we got there was a girl with Jay. A fight ensued and I called 911. I also beat the everlasting shit out of Jay. Unfortunately my mom couldn't see that and thought Jay was winning. So she stabbed him. So when police showed up they gave a good look at my mom with choke marks from the fight, and arrested her for assault and breaking and entering. Chapter 4 Leaving Florida and having a very merry Christmas. Well, the trial came and went. My mother is off the hook but she will be a felon until a completion of a program. So we left him in Florida and decided to move back north to New Jersey. My mom breaking up with Jay was a count to me because I pushed hard for it. Life continues. But November comes around and I received news that made me burst out in laughter. Jay's sister came forward and told us he shot himself in the head. I even read his sewer slide note and everything. I ruined his relationship with my mom and karma came back. Life goes on, and he dies unloved and alone. Those who have had a near-death experience, what happened? My pregnant wife got beat with a rock to protect me, and I lost feelings for her. Last year my wife and I were at the park and someone just randomly yelled at us for speaking in my native language. My wife is trying to learn because she's not Korean, or Asian at all, but wants to only speak Korean at home to make sure our family is fully bilingual and they don't lose their culture. We were practicing out loud and sharing a snack and this guy just walks up to us out of nowhere with wild, racist BS. He kicked our food and there was some arguing, and while I was calling the police with my back turned he tried to hit me with a pretty large rock. My wife jumped in between and ended up taking the full force of the hit, which literally busted her forehead open and knocked her out cold for almost a minute. I rushed my wife to the hospital and the guy ran off and was eventually caught by police a few weeks later. My wife needed 14 stitches right across her face, and had 2 black eyes and blood in them. Her face was swollen beyond recognition for a few days too, and when she fell, messed up an old knee injury, so when she got out of the hospital the next day half her face was covered in bandages and she was limping. But she was still cracking jokes in the ER. After the bandages and stitches came out, she was told she would need to wait at least a year before having her scar surgically fixed or whatever treatments. But now that the year is almost past, I've started hinting at her scheduling appointments and such. This entire time I've been struggling with remaining attracted to her despite it, but didn't tell her, since I didn't want to be cruel. She's now saying she doesn't think she wants to get anything done because she wants to save the money for the baby. I've offered to pay for half of it, and she still hasn't really looked into having it done. I've also pushed back her meeting my parents again because of this, and bringing her around my friends since it happened. Another part of me is also just sort of mad she even did it. I feel like half of a man now and I've had to delete myself off dating apps before making a mistake and channeling it all at the gym, but every time I look at her I'm reminded of all of those feelings. She hasn't changed a bit besides the scar. She's obviously handled it way better than I did, and somehow it's making me love her less. This, plus the pregnancy. I don't even know what to do. I thought about asking for a hall pass, but I know without a doubt she will leave me. I thought about taking care of my needs on the side so I can be the man she needs me to be, but I know she will eventually find out and she will hate me and make my life hell, or leave me a single father and I will never hear from her again. I just wish it had never happened, but I really need some other perspective or opinion on this. What can no one know about you? I accidentally tricked my neighbor into thinking I was depressed when in reality I was getting off to people crying. I have this fetish for people crying. Recently, I've been delving more into that side of myself, trying to really see what gets me off. That all culminated in me just watching videos of people crying and wanking off to that. Since I live alone in my apartment and worked at home, I use the TV in my living room. Unfortunately, I underestimated how thin the walls were. I was about to head out to go get some coffee with friends but saw that someone had left a basket of snacks and chocolate on my door. I thought nothing of it, maybe someone just moved in or something. No other door had this basket, so I don't know why I briefly thought that, but I do have a penchant for dismissing things that aren't actively affecting my life right at that moment, so I just put the basket in my house and went about my day. I got home and snacked on a few of the chocolate and went about my nightly routine of watching those videos. Then I kept getting more and more snacks put out on my front door. Almost every day. Nothing major like the basket I got on the first day, but just little chocolate bars put out on the floor. I just ate the snacks as soon as I see them in front of my door and almost completely neglected the big basket I got. This went on for a week or so. Then, today, I woke up to someone knocking on my door. When I opened it, it was my neighbor. I've seen her a few times when we coincidentally get out the door at the same time and we've greeted each other. She was holding another basket of snacks and asked me if I was alright from last night and if I got her other basket. Confused, I said I was alright and asked why she's giving those to me. Then, she looked a bit embarrassed and admitted to hearing loud crying coming from my apartment since she lived next door. She also asked if I saw the note in her basket. I didn't remember seeing a note, but I was too embarrassed to continue this conversation and politely thanked her before accepting her basket and closing the door. Sure enough, there was a note in the first basket that was somewhat buried by the chocolate. If I'd eaten a bit more I would have realized. It detailed how she'd been hearing me cry for a bit, and then she went on to describe the story of her battles with depression. She then said how she'd love to get to know me and is there if I wanted to talk about it.
What's your darkest confession? I've cheated in every relationship I've ever been in. I, 21F, have cheated on every partner I've had since high school, being roughly 6 to 7 relationships. Some were impulsive, Some were carefully thought out and planned around my partners, others stemmed from selfishness, being too scared to break up, and some I felt so guilty about I confessed. I've either had multiple partners or emotionally/physically cheated on the one. The reasons range from insecurity, boredom, ego, general H0 or newness, or resentful towards my partner. My last relationship was probably my most relentless, with both me and the boyfriend cheating on each other tens of hundreds of times over a period of 2 years. Since that ended, I've stick to casual hookups and nothing more. I hate the person I am when I cheat on someone that at the end of the day, was just looking for love like me. I also hate myself when cheating on a partner who did it first instead of leaving. I decided not to date until I can understand my behavior and work through my insecurities, even if that takes me years of therapy and self-reflection. My ADHD also plays a role, not an excuse, on my behavioral actions and impulses, so I want to learn how to control that as well before jumping into the dating pool. Before I close, I want to add 2 of my strongest opinions from being a serial cheater: all cheating is cheating, no matter how minor. Girls kissing girlfriends, friendly flirting, etc. Whether I was dancing with a stranger in a bar or making overly friendly small talk with a coworker, I knew what I was doing. If someone cheats on you, they do not love you. I've told countless partners I loved them while cheating knowing I didn't. Cheating is always enacted from pure selfishness decided against your partner's wishes, knowing it will cause hurt to them. That's something you do when you don't love someone, and love has no room for selfishness.
What did someone slip up saying when they were drunk? I was not babysitting my wife after she got super drunk. My wife and I were on vacation in a foreign city. We met up with some friends, went out to dinner and then hit the bars, and I got fairly tipsy/borderline drunk. Out of nowhere, my wife decides it's time to go all out and informs me it's her turn to get drunk. Problem was, I'm already tipsy/drunk Lamau. Then she Jewett disappears. We sent a female from the group into the bathroom to find her. But no, my wife just vanished to the bar and proceeded to down 12 shots of Fireball whiskey and some flavored vodka. Yeah, you can imagine how that went down. She pukes all over the place, pukes again on the street, and drunk me is kinda all on my lonesome as our friends are all trashed too. Somehow, I managed to navigate both of us back to the hotel on foot. I get her into the shower to clean off the puke, she says she's okay, and I flop onto the bed and pass TF out immediately. All seems well, until 2 a.m. rolls around and the hotel phone starts blaring. As I'm groggily trying to figure out what's happening, I get out of bed and I realize my feet are literally wading in water on the carpet, 2 inches deep. She passed out in the shower, not a bathtub, shower only, and her butt perfectly blocked the drain in the floor. It ended up flooding our entire hotel room and leaking out into the hallway and into someone else's room, who presumably called the hotel staff. We managed to get ourselves dressed, hotel staff comes up to talk, and we're shuffled to a new room without a watery carpet. No real consequences and we're not charged any fees. But here's the crux of the issue, my wife turns around and blames me for the entire circus. Apparently, I should have been more attentive and made sure she got out of the shower? I guess I would get it if she didn't spring this on me after it was too late for me to not drink. So am I the a-hole?